In this video, we're talking about the top 5 mistakes that I've made speculating. Some valuable information whether you're just getting started or whether you're a seasoned speculator. Stay tuned.
Bry's Comics.
I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, and that is the question, is speculation dead? Is comic book speculation on new comic book day releases even still a viable way to have this hobby fund itself? And I think to answer that question, I think it's important to understand that the comic book market has gone through tremendous changes over the past 3 years. A lot of things have changed and a lot of things have stayed the same. The economy is in a really rough place right now. Everybody's feeling it, and that's having a direct impact on the comic book market. So it does mean that, opportunities are harder to find and the profits are going to be less, but the opportunities are still there. And I think that over the next few years, there are going to be new characters that are introduced in comic books first that eventually will be major players in the MCU, and new characters and new creations that will be cult classics and huge indie favorites that go on to be highly successful TV shows. That's all coming over the next few years and for the rest of time. New content, new videos, new universes are constantly being created in comic books first that go on to TVs and movies that have tremendous value in those comic books. And as long as that function is still there, there is still opportunity in comic book speculation. I actually have a couple of predictions for some upcoming characters that I think are going to go on to be big players in the MCU that haven't even been released yet. And I'm going to wait until after FOC to release that video because I don't want to do a video before FOC and have a whole bunch of people, order this book and have it be way overprinted. So stay tuned and stick around. Hit that notification bell if that's something that interests you. This channel is about comic book investment and speculation and tips on how to have the hobby fund itself. And I do think that there is still room and potential in comic book speculation, but you gotta be a little bit more on your game these days. But that trend will turn around. The economy will turn around. We're gonna come out of this. Even if you're not going as hard right now because of the economy, because of the state of the market, you can still stay up to date on the trends and different things that work and don't work in comic book speculation so that when the market does turn around, you're ready to go. You're off to the races because, the getting is good again, because the getting will get good again. I promise you that. So with that said, let's hop back to my previous self. I recorded this video earlier, that's why I have a different outfit and stuff, and hop into the list of these mistakes. All right, so let's hop into this list. Mistake number 1 at the top of the list is trying to catch the peak or waiting too long to sell. This is something that is incredibly difficult to grasp in comic book speculation, is figuring out when is the best time to sell. Of course, the peak is the best time, but nobody can predict where that is going to be, and it's incredibly difficult to time. And in my opinion, the best way is to not even try to catch the peak, but to just sell when you know you're approaching the peak, because that is predictable. It is predictable to see when demand is through the roof for a book, when prices are way elevated. You know that you're approaching the peak, and inevitably there will be a peak. All things that go up must come down, and you don't want to be on the downside of that slope when the hype for the character or the spec kind of dies down a little bit and prices come down. If you're on the downslope, at any point in the downslope, that means demand has gone down in most cases, so it's going to be harder to move the book. So my advice would be, don't even try to catch the peak, just try to catch that up curve. And as long as you're making a healthy profit somewhere on that up curve, you are doing okay. It ties into one of my favorite sayings in comic book speculation, which is nobody ever went broke taking a profit, but many people have gone broke holding out for more profit. If you're in the green, if you're at a healthy margin where you've made some profit, and if you don't be greedy and just sell then, you're doing okay. And if you make a habit of that, selling on this up curve, over the long run, it's a lot better strategy than trying to catch the peak. We always do a monthly giveaway here on the YouTube channel. If you subscribe to the channel, comment on this video, and like this video, you're entered to win a 10-cent Detective Comics. And if you head over to brycecomics.com and sign up for the newsletter, you're entered to win another slab over there, another 10-cent Detective Comics. Use code COLLECT10 for 10% off all in-stock items at brycecomics.com. We just got a whole bunch of new stuff in, and there is more new stuff on the way. Mistake number 2 is waiting too long to buy in. And my advice here is pass when the window is gone. A good example of this is Dr. Doom spec, for example. Dr. Doom in his first appearance in Fantastic Four #5, an incredibly pricey book because it's such an important key to Marvel comic books in general. However, there was a time when you could speculate on Fantastic Four #5 and buy that with the intentions to flip it for a profit. I think the window of flipping it for a profit has probably passed at this point in time in this current market, but there are some tips that we can learn from the journey of the prices for Dr. Doom keys. So Dr. Doom is a key that was hitting the hot and trending list week after week after week, all new record-breaking high week after week after week. And my advice here is if you pull the trigger too late, and the mistake here is waiting too long to buy in. If you buy in on that third or fourth week that it's on the hot list, you may have bought the peak. And it's important to just let it pass when it passes. If it takes you 3 or 4 weeks to actually be convinced and go, you know what, I keep seeing this, it's on every single feed that I have on Instagram is Dr. Doom spec and Fantastic Four #5. If it takes you that long to be convinced, you may have missed your opportunity. And it's important to recognize when that happens and to let it pass. Now, Dr. Doom is a great example because there's several different avenues that you can take. If you're finally convinced that there's Dr. Doom spec, that he's going to show up in the MCU, there's lots of other variants, especially for a character like Dr. Doom. There's dozens of awesome covers, awesome variants that take time to get picked up on the hot and trending list, that take time to get picked up by the comic community. A lot of times people say, wow, I've never even seen that cover for Dr. Doom before. And if you're thinking that, other people will likely think that too. So there was a lot of opportunity there for a long time with Dr. Doom where there was cover price spec, new releases with awesome covers for Dr. Doom where you could buy it for cover price and sell it for 2-3 times the money once this spec actually comes to fruition. So mistake number 2 is waiting too long to buy in, and over time you will recognize when that window has passed and when to let it just pass on by. Mistake number 3 is buying too much or buying too little. And this depends largely on your selling platforms. If you're selling on eBay and Instagram and that's the only place, you know better than anyone else what your selling platform is, what it can handle, what kind of volume you can move. And it depends on where you are in your spec journey. So if you're at your LCS and you see that hot spec for cover price and you're able to pick up 2 copies and sell those 2 copies for a $20 to $50 profit, you're doing great. That's fantastic. $20 to $50 profit. You've just funded the hobby to some degree. Maybe that covers your new comic book day purchase, and that's fantastic. But what if you had the opportunity to buy 10 copies or 20 copies or 100 copies? And this is where it becomes really important to know your platform and what kind of volume you can handle. Because if it's a super hot spec like Dr. Doom spec and its cover price, it may be, somewhat easy for you to move 10 or 20 copies. And so it really depends on the type of book, and this is where you have to think about the type of demand. A spec like Dr. Doom, there's going to be incredible demand. Again, if you're on your Instagram feed and all you're seeing is post after post about Dr. Doom, that means, the demand for Dr. Doom is incredibly high. But if you're speccing on like an indie option series or something and you have the opportunity to buy 20 copies of that, consider the demand. Is this, even if this spec hits, are people going to really go crazy for this indie option series? What is the mark? I'm not saying that you should pass on indie option series. I'm just saying that you should carefully evaluate how much you buy, because mistake number 3 is buying too much or too little. Follow me on Whatnot for weekly live comic book auctions. Link down in the description for $15 towards your first purchase. Mistake number 4 is buying the wrong variant. And this applies mostly to modern spec. And my advice here is to stick with cover A, because I believe about 9 times out of 10, cover A is going to be the safest bet. Of course, there is exceptions to that. There are situations where the variants way outperform cover A, but it's really hard to predict when that is going to happen. And that's why I think the safer bet is to just go with cover A. I have a couple examples here on both sides of the coin. So when Nice House on the Lake first came out, I was all in on that spec and I went hard on cover B. And the reason I went with cover B is because it featured the first cover appearance of the main character, Walter. I thought it was a really cool kind of abstract art, and I went hard on cover B. Well, it turns out cover A was the one that was most desirable of the 2 variants. And I think it just has to do with recognizability. Like, people see cover A, they recognize what it is, they know what it is, they went with that. It's also a really cool cover. It's a little less abstract. Maybe people just weren't feeling the abstractness of cover B as much as I was. So I went with the wrong variant. If I would have just stuck with cover A, I would have been in better shape. Now, the other side of the coin, when the variants outperform cover A, an example of that is Miles Morales Spider-Man number 13, the first appearance of Billy Morales, Miles Morales' sister. And the variants, there's several variants for that. There's a Raza variant and there's a Venom Island variant by Petrovic. And both of those variants outperform the cover A. And I think what's going on here is with the Raza variant, you have Miles, the main character, front and center there. He's more prominent. It's a really cool cover. It's got great contrast, and it just features the spec character more than the cover A. Cover A is kind of busy, has a lot going on. And with the Petrovic variant, I think what's different about this one is it's kind of novel. It's new. It's something that's like, whoa, that's striking. I don't see that all the time. And so it, is performing better than cover A. But it's very difficult to predict. So my advice, unless you are a seasoned collector, unless you really, really know, like, you're able to look at that Raza variant and know, man, that's going to do way better than cover A. If you just stick with cover A, you'll be safer, because cover A for Miles Morales 13 still demands a really good price for a spec book. So unless you're really good, I would stick with cover A. Don't forget to follow me over on Instagram for trades, for grails, and other fresh content over there. Hope to see you there. Mistake number 5 is improper accounting. If you don't have your accounting and your bookkeeping set up correctly, it can be very misleading for your comic book speculation journeys. What I'm talking about here is keeping track of all of your expenses on the buying side and on the selling side. So if when you're buying books, you're paying sales tax and shipping, keeping a record of that. When on the selling side, if you're paying selling fees, and keeping a track of all of the expenses that come with selling, including the paper it takes to print your label on, the ink, the packing materials. I mean everything, because if you don't keep track of that, you can be misled, especially if you open up your eBay app and it tells you your 90-day total and you think, I'm making all this money. Well, that 90-day total isn't your net, it's your gross, and it doesn't take into account all of the fees and stuff. So unless you have accurate accounting, you don't really know how much money you're making. And you could have a situation where you went hard on a book, you bought 10 copies, you sold all those copies for more than you paid for them. But if you look at the actual accounting, you actually took a $5 loss. And if you didn't have proper accounting set up, you wouldn't know that, because the last thing you want to do is spin your wheels, spend all this time to actually move 10 copies of a book just to find out that you actually lost $5. And if you have that accurate accounting, you can look and say, okay, what went wrong on this? Did I buy too much? Did I buy too little? And then move forward from there. It's also really important to contact a CPA and get some tax advice, because you should only be paying income tax on your profits, not your total sales. A lot of people get these two mixed up. And if you're paying taxes on your total sales and not just your profits, that's really going to affect your bottom line, if not put you in the red. So it's important to talk to a CPA, know the tax laws in your area, and follow them accordingly. That's it for this video, you guys. Just me talking about 5 mistakes that I've made speculating, that if you can really hone in on these, you will be off to the races. Stay tuned for a future video where I talk about the top 5 mistakes I've made collecting. A slightly different video, but both closely related. Speculating and collecting can be closely related. I think it's a great way to be a collector, is to speculate. There's ways to do it right, and I plan to drop a future video there about mistakes I've made collecting. Don't Don't forget, pre-sales are live now for my first ever Bryce Comics exclusive Miles Morales Spider-Man #1 by In-Hyuk Lee over at brycecomics.com. Trade dress, Virgin, CGC options, regular covers, incentive covers. We got it all. Available now at brycecomics.com. Thank you as always for sticking with me to the end of the video, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Bryce Comics.